That was Jesse Goblin with Controlled Demolition. Alright then, it's time for my first guest tonight, and he didn't win the election in Aberdeen South, but the battle continues. Robert Green, welcome back to the Tony Legend Show.
Thank you very much, Tony. Nice to talk to you, and thank you for having us back on.
No problem, it's a pleasure. Now, you aren't an MP right now, but at least you had the guts to take a stand. Looking back on the whole first that was the general election in Aberdeen South, specifically the fact that you couldn't enter the constituency in which you were standing, how will you reflect on the process of the general election?
Well, obviously, I think that I was treated extremely unfairly, and I think that my treatment went way beyond any reasonable assessment of the democratic process. Obviously, everything was done to prevent me from standing in Aberdeen in the first place. As many listeners will know, I was arrested shortly before I was due to sign my papers in order to make the stand, which obviously seemed to be an attempt to try and delay matters so that I would miss the deadline. But thanks to the wonderful support I got from Hollie's army, and I'm sure helping me to get my release, I just had about time to do that, and my wonderful team up in Scotland managed to get everything sorted out just in time. Nevertheless, the fact that I believe that I was certainly the only person in this parliamentary election not to be allowed to either stand in the constituency which I sought to represent, nor to actually even address directly the views that I hold to and the issues to the electorate. This is something that I think is a very, very serious attack on democracy. Just putting the case that I'm trying to promote aside for one moment, I think this is completely out of order. I believe that this action was politically motivated because the authorities in Scotland were absolutely terrified of me putting the facts or the case before the people of Aberdeen South.
Indeed. And what do you make of the actual outcome of the general election itself, with the whole hung parliament thing and all that?
Well, it's just interesting. I don't have any strong views on it. I guess this was a situation that a lot of people predicted, and I think all that I can say is that I hope that the people concerned, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats working together, I hope that they, and in fact, indeed all the parties, will look very much at the national interest at this time, because obviously the economic situation is extremely serious, and I just hope that the parties will put aside sort of their factional interest to work for the good of the country. And I would think that most people in the country, irrespective of their political beliefs, would probably hope that that would be the case.
And you're still a very busy man. What have you got going on at the moment? And is anyone in the Scottish Government even prepared to speak about the case of Hollie?
Not at the present time, no. We're still getting a sort of blanket on this at the blank on this at the moment. It is the story that nobody seems to dare to talk about in Scotland. We have had a few breakthroughs. There was an article in The Drum, one of the very respected legal magazine, on the 28th of April about Mrs. Angelini's role, Lord Advocate's role in the case, in particular regard to the fact they were trying to find out who was funding the attacks on the media, or the threats on the media from the solicitor Levy and McRae. But the Lord Advocate's office refused to disclose who was paying for the fees for the lawyers to make those threats against the various established people in the Scottish media, which I think is really appalling.
Indeed. It's obviously the Hollie case, as it continues, and the silence is deafening from the establishment, so to speak. But another story which is quite positive at the moment is that of Maureen Spalek. If you could even call it positive, it's still a very bad situation. But she's been once again this week featured in the Sunday Telegraph. And thankfully, there's only a few mainstream journalists who I actually respect. Christopher Booker is one of them, and he has picked up Maureen's story. What can you tell me about Maureen's case and her recent appearances in court?
Yes, I can. I think it's important to say, first of all, that I don't represent Maureen on this, so I can't speak with great authority on it, but I do know quite a lot about. I do know Maureen, and I do know quite a lot about the background of the case, and I really do think that she's been treated very, very badly indeed by the authorities. And I have to say the circumstances around the case, which I'll sort of elaborate on in a minute or two, lead me to believe that this is something that is really serious and has certain sinister repercussions. Now, I was on Wednesday, Maureen was at Runcorn Magistrates Court, and I was there along with a number of other people and people from the media, and she has to come back to Warrington on the 7th of June for a pre-trial hearing. Obviously, this is all about sending a birthday card to one of her children, which, seems to be an extremely very sort of over-the-top way of dealing with something of that. A mother sends a birthday card to one of her children who's been taken away from her, we think very unfairly, and she gets arrested and has police cars coming around to her house and all sorts of things, and is hauled before the court. I think it's a very, very disturbing case indeed. Now, I think one of the important things I think that has not yet come out into the public domain, but I think needs to be looked at, is that there are some when I mention the word sinister, I think when I tell you what I'm going to tell you now, I think every listener will understand exactly what I mean. As we know, in the Hollie Greig case, one of the key witnesses was murdered. In this case, we have had one key witness murdered and one murderer who was found dead in his cell. I'll just put it into perspective. The nurse who was responsible for putting Mrs. Spalek's children into care, and I have to say that the court described her as an excellent mother, and she was in good health. So I'm not quite sure what law permits children to be taken away from their natural mother, who is described as excellent and in good health. I haven't really been able to quite get my head around that one yet. But the nurse who was responsible for putting the children in care was actually, Mrs. Spalek actually was keen to talk to her to find out on what she'd based this on. But the nurse concerned was strangled, would you believe? And
I've been talking to Maureen quite a lot myself, and I know that Bill Maloney has been talking to her as well, who I had on the show last week, and quite positive, at least that the mainstream media is at least paying a bit of attention to her case.
Yes.
But moving on, just before you go, Robert, I know yesterday...
There's just one of the incidents of that, Tony, which I would like to carry on, because the person who murdered the nurse was actually convicted of the murder. And of course, he too would be someone that perhaps might need to be talked about this particular case. But one day he was found dead in his cell in prison. So we have two people who really would be, I think certainly the nurse and possibly the murderer themselves would be key witnesses, sort of died in very unusual circumstances. Now, I have to say, with the whole case, everything around this case, I would say from what I've looked at it, it would certainly call for an independent public inquiry, and I think the circumstances around it, were they to be known and to come out into the public domain, wouldn't just make me wonder, it would make anybody wonder.
Indeed, and well, we look forward to hopefully getting Maureen on the show at some stage. She's got a lot of court cases coming up and stuff.
Yes.
But so she can't really talk until after the court cases. I wanted to say to you about yesterday. I know you were down in London at Brixton Academy.
Yes, that's right.
David Icke was on stage all day. Just tell me about that, because I know you were down there and you checked.
Yes, it was a wonderful occasion actually for supporters of Hollie and for the case, and to try to bring all these atrocities to so that justice can be done. It really was tremendous. We outside the building, while people were queuing up, there were people with Hollie T-shirts. Hollie T-shirts were being picked up all the time. Leaflets were being picked up. There was musicians playing with pictures of Hollie on their guitars, and all kinds of things going on outside. And I think everybody sort of learned about, if they didn't know already, they learned a lot about Hollie's case. During the course of the talk, David Icke gave a very rousing talk. He talked about a lot of issues, very controversial, many of them, which I'm sure anybody who knows about David Icke would know about. But he's a very sincere man who's certainly got the courage to speak talk about things that perhaps other people would be afraid of doing so. And part of the talk he dedicated to Hollie's case, and made some very kind remarks, some very, very important remarks about the case, and was kind enough to make some rather nice remarks about me, for which I was very grateful. And I have to say the audience received them very well indeed. And, I just had literally, I don't know how many people came up to me during the course of the day to wish me well and offer their full support for this, to bring this terrible case to justice.
Indeed. Well, Robert, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much for talking to us, and keep up all that important work that you do, and we will speak to you again in the future, all right?
Well, thank you very much, Tony. It's very nice to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
No problem. There he goes, folks.